that's something else. But everything they can ask for, bicycle, whatever, they choose to, go with, feed them and
yeah, something for them. Yeah, they're farmers. Yeah, and another area in Ghana, West Africa, those guys go out on the street and preach all the time. They do street preaching. So when they graduated, they said rather than a bicycle, they said we could use a bicycle to ride, but they said we would like to have a portable megaphone. That you've got a microphone, and you set up a speaker, and it's charged by solar or battery or by electricity. So there's 15 of them now out on the street about every day preaching. So I thought, well, that's good. We'll get them what they want. If they prefer that over a bicycle, then we'll do that. So they're excited to have all of that. Ever since I had COVID pneumonia a couple of years ago, I have had something that I cannot get rid of as far as a cough type thing. So I want you to know I'm not sick. I do this basically every day of my life. I've got something like hung in my throat and I can't get it up. I've taken antibiotics, I've taken everything, and I've got a little scar tissue and stuff in my lungs. So you'll hear me coughing and drinking water from time to time, and that's what it is. I'm not contagious. Just wanted to tell you that. We looked at Genesis chapter 1 at the beginning, the origin of the universe, the origin of life, of man, of marriage, the origin of evil, language. We talked about that. Language just didn't evolve from cavemen. God created Adam and Eve, and He gave them the ability to speak a language, and then He communicated with them in language. And I've often thought of this, and you probably have as well, that it's impossible, of course, to go back to right after the creation. But if we somehow or another could go back, in 6 days He created the heavens and earth, the seventh day He rested, and then on the eighth day, if we could have gone back, we would have seen full-grown trees, we would have seen rivers that were flowing, we would have seen fish in the rivers that were there. There would have been big animals running around, not babies. Everything wouldn't have been babies. Everything's full grown. Yeah. And then there's a chicken that lay an egg. That's right. And we would have said, oh, now I understand which came first. But you see all of that full grown. And had you seen Adam standing there and Eve standing there when they're day number 8, they would not have been little babies. Full grown man, full grown woman. And that's something we have to remember. God created everything, the minerals that's in the ground, the oil and other things, the diamonds, places like the Grand Canyon. You just stood there and said, well, as wide as that is, I bet it's taken 3 million years for it to get that wide. No, it's 8 days old. So the evolutionists and others just don't take that into consideration. And we talk about God creating, that Hebrew word, He created from nothing. He didn't just take a piece of clay, like you could do maybe, and shape it and make it look like a flower pot or something to drink out of. He made something to drink out of with no clay. He just spoke it into existence, and it came into existence. And we can't understand that. And then we talk about God creating the space, God creating the universe. And I don't know, when I read that sometimes, I guess I read it quickly and I think, well, yeah, God created the heaven and the earth. Yeah, God made the earth. Earth's big, isn't it? Yeah, it's big. Well, how big is the universe? Wow. That just blows your mind. To think about our little solar system here is like a half a cup of water in the ocean. That the other planets and everything that's out there is just unreal. How big all of that is, and God just spoke all of that into existence without anything. We talked about light. I think I ended our lesson last time on how big is the universe. Scientists say that the universe is 93 billion light years away, and a light year is how fast light travels. Light travels it's 186,000 miles per second, not feet, but 186,000 miles per second. So a light year would be how far light would travel from January the 1st to December the 31st. And light traveling, in 1 year, light would travel 6 trillion years. And they say that the universe is 93 billion years across. What we can see of it and what we know of it. And of course, they're always saying too that if you could travel 100 years in space and set up another telescope, the Hubble telescope, and look farther out into space, you'd see more than what you just passed. So it just blows our mind to think about the size of the universe that God created. When we talk about evolution, and I want to spend a little time, but not a lot of time, on evolution. The word evolution, of course, means change. And I believe in evolution. And you know what causes me to believe in evolution? When I go look in the mirror and remember what I looked like when I was 18 years old, I believe in evolution. I have changed. As one of our grandchildren so humorously said one time, as my picture and Carolyn's picture is sitting on the little table there as you enter the front door a few days after we got married, and one of the grandkids said, "Who's the young dude there with Nana?" I'm that young dude that he didn't even know who he was by looking at the picture. So we do change, but not the concept of organic evolution from the standpoint of single cell changing into complicated cell, finally into fish, and then into birds, and then into mammals, and then into monkeys, and then into men. No, we don't believe that at all. And there's just no scientific evidence for it. But you got a lot of people that are dishonest that that's the route they're going to go. In 1 Timothy 6, verses 20 and 21, Paul said to Timothy, "O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust. Avoid profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called, which some professing have erred concerning the faith." Isn't that interesting? That here all these years ago, the Bible warns us about science falsely so called. False science. Science is supposed to deal with experimentation. So science is supposed to be, I have a hypothesis. And my hypothesis is that if I do this and this and this, I'll get this outcome, this result. And I do it, and I do get that outcome. Well, if I do it again, I'll get the same outcome. And if I do it again, I'll get the same. There's certain chemicals that if you mix them together, they'll explode. There's certain chemicals, you mix them together, they'll bubble and they'll stink real bad. And every time you do that, they'll do that. Well, how can you repeat this so-called evolution that happened, where animals evolved, single-cell things evolved? You got false science. Now, also, our young people are bullied sometimes. Just like in politics, sometimes somebody will say something that anyone with a half a brain wouldn't vote for that guy over there, or would know better than that. Well, that's an intimidation tactic. Well, I don't want to be considered with a half a brain, so I'll go with this. So anybody that's got a half a brain knows that evolution's true, and you're being intimidated. Sometimes it's anybody with a half a brain knows there is no God. They do that and say that. They're trying to intimidate you. All intelligent people believe in evolution. Well, do you believe in evolution? The little kid says, well, I don't want to be called an ignoramus, so I guess I do. If all intelligent people believe in it, then surely I do. Well, that's a false statement. There are hundreds and hundreds of scientists in the world that do not believe in this nonsense of evolution. Many of them are Bible believers, and they understand creation. Many medical doctors, a lot of medical doctors, don't believe in that because they know how the body is made and they understand the complexity of it, and there must have been a designer. That didn't just evolve over a period of millions and millions of years. Some claim to believe in evolution because they feel it offers a better, more logical explanation for the problem of evil, suffering exists in the world. They say, if there is a God, why doesn't He correct the injustices and stop suffering? So that's been one of the big arguments of the atheist. He says, well, I know there is no God. Why? Well, turn your TV on. Look at these little old children over here that are starving to death and being blown apart in war and all the things. If there was a God, He wouldn't allow that to take place. You wouldn't let it take place if you were there and you could stop it, would you? Well, no, you wouldn't want little children to suffer. You'd want to save children. Well, that's a false argument there, because when you have freedom of choice, you have the possibility of people freely choosing to do the wrong thing. Adolf Hitler will stand before God and be judged as an individual. He had freedom of choice. He didn't have to murder all those Jews, but he chose to do that. And God's not going to stop him and make him do the right thing any more than he's going to make you do the right thing. He doesn't cause people not to do the wrong thing, and he doesn't cause people to do the right thing. Choose you this day whom you'll serve, Joshua said, as the book of Joshua ended. You choose. You decide. So they see the problem of pain and suffering, and they say, well, can't be a God. And if there's no God, we've got to explain how we're here. So evolution might work then and explain it. I got some, just a few quotes here from some guys and some of the statements they made. Some believe in evolution out of a preconceived idea and prejudice. Evolution, this guy said, evolution is unproven and unprovable, but we believe it because the only alternative is special creation, and that's unthinkable. That's W.A. Criswell in a quote, Did Man Just Happen? That's the book. He said, well, we believe in it because if you don't believe in evolution, then you have to believe in special creation. And if you believe in special creation, then there's a God. And if there's a God, then the Bible's right. And if the Bible's right, how I'm living is condemned, and I'm going to hell. And I'm not going to believe that. So if I'm an evolutionist and I deny that there's a God and I deny that there's a Bible, then if I live like an animal, then so what? I am an animal. I'm just an animal. I'm just an educated animal that can stand up on my back feet and walk and talk where the others can't do that. So, yeah. And the old, there used to be a cartoon, some of you may have seen it, where the monkey or the ape is sitting holding his chin, holding the human skull. And he says, don't blame that on us. He said, we know better than that. We don't act like those crazy people. Human beings are not like us. We're better than they are, said the ape. And there may be a lot of truth to that. Some, in an effort to escape the responsibility of Almighty God as Creator, have bought on to this thing. They try to intimidate people into believing this theory. As we said, all educated people believe it. You're an ignoramus if you don't believe it. They go on with that. All reputable biologists have agreed that evolution of life on Earth is an established fact. That's some of the things they say. And they say some of the things like the theory of evolution is as proven a fact as human digestion, or the beating of the heart, or that lungs take air in and out. In other words, it's that proven. Well, it's not. That's false. That's a false statement. And our children need to be told that. And I always tried to tell our grandkids in school. And of course, we're fortunate to live in the South because a lot of our school teachers do believe in God, but in some areas they don't. But I told mine when they were in college, you put on the test what they asked for on the test to make the grade, but you don't have to believe that. You can say in your answer, our science book says that the earth is 10 billion years old. That's not you saying, I believe the earth is 10 billion years old. You can say, this is what the book says, and you'll get your grade from the class, and then you go on to the next situation. Here was another one. In the evolutionary pattern of thought, there is no longer need or room for the supernatural. The earth was not created, it evolved. So did animals and plants that inhabit it, including our human selves, the mind and soul, as well as the brain and body. So did religion. Religion evolved just like the lower forms of animals. And of course we don't see that here in Genesis chapter 1, do we? In Exodus chapter 31, verse 17, where we talk about the creation, he says, it is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. So the idea of keeping the Sabbath, he made that as a sign as it tied into creation. He said in Psalm 8 verse 3, when I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained. You think about that. The work of your fingers, the sun and the moon and the stars was made with your fingers? Must be an awful powerful being that can do that with just his fingers. And Jehovah God is that powerful. And Mark chapter 10 and verse 6, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. In Genesis 3 and verse 20, and Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. The mother of all living. You know, sometimes I see stuff on TV and they talk about our going to other planets one of these days and wondering if we're going to find another race of people there. Well, if they do, Eve would be their mother. Because Eve's the mother of all living. And how'd they get there 10,000 years ago? What spaceship did they use to get there? Or did God create people and transport them over to there? No, that's silly, some of the things that people say. Evolution starts, the concept of evolution, the atheistic form of evolution, it starts with matter and then explains how matter evolved and got to where we are today. It starts with something and goes to a more complicated. Well, either God is eternal or matter is eternal. That's just a logical statement. Either God's always existed or matter has always existed. Well, let's think about God, first of all. Is God contingent? Does he have to have something for his existence? Did somebody make him? Did he have a father and a mother? Was there a time he didn't exist? No. He's self-sufficient. He doesn't need anything. No circumstance can change and make him be gone or out of the picture. Well, what about matter? It's contingent on other things, isn't it? When we think about trees, trees come from somewhere. You know, trees haven't just always existed. Where does grass come from? You know, it comes from seed. And we're going to read here in Genesis chapter 1 that everything was to bring forth after its kind, and seed bearing after its kind. Apples, you've got some beautiful part of the country here with some beautiful apples here. Where do those apples come from? Now, they didn't just appear one day. You have to have the seed. Put the seed in the ground. And God, in the very beginning, I'm sure Adam and Eve could walk, and there's apple trees. They're there. Not seed for him to plant, but full-grown apples. And not just one tree, but there were trees everywhere. And he could go through and see all of that. Where did matter come from? Well, it's contingent and dependent upon something else. Life is dependent upon something else. Fish comes from fish. Birds come from birds. So have fish and birds always existed? Has matter always existed? Well, you start and say, well, here's the side of the mountain, and the amino acid comes down the side of the mountain into the little pool, and you got the single cell creature started, and from that all life as we know it today started. Where did the mountain come from? Where did the volcano come from? Are volcanoes eternal? Have they always been here? And the answer, of course, is no. They haven't always. If evolution occurred and brought new life forms or transitional forms, where are they today? If this happened over millions and millions of years, that slowly fish turned into birds and had some scales on it, but then it could fly, and over a period of a few more years it got rid of those scales, there ought to be fish here still that's flying. There ought to be some of this. Darwin said in his book, Origin of the Species, he said there hasn't been that many fossils found. But he said, I assure you, I'm not quoting word for word, but this is basically what he said. He said, I assure you, in time, the fossils will be found to show the transitional forms. Well, they haven't yet. But we've got some dishonest stuff going on. Some of our textbooks, and I've seen this with our children's books and even some college classes that I took years ago. Show us fossil man, Neanderthal man. I forget some of the names of some of those guys and what they call themselves, but those were the transitional ones. That's the half man, half ape. And they've got the fossil records. And some of the scientists that found it, I really love the way they did it. They got those bones and they put them in a box, like a shoe box, and they said, we've got right here proof that shows that man evolved from an ape. And the scientists that didn't believe it said, let me see it. And they said, no, you can't see it. Yes, it's like a little kid saying, I've got a leprechaun in this box right here. You can't see it. I'm not going to show it to you. It's really there. So they put that in the book. And they even put the clothing that they were wearing, and the hairstyle, and the tools that they were carrying. And then finally, years and years went by, and they finally did let some of the scientists see some of this. Java Man, and I've seen them in museums, different places all around the world, British Museum and other places. And they find this, and now, years later, after they've taught it to our children for 50 years, now they let some scientists that are real skeptical analyze it and look at it. And they say, okay, all right, let's look at it. They begin to look at it and they say, okay, this is a jawbone. This bone is of a human. That's a man. We've got a man's jawbone. All right, let's look here. We've got some teeth. We've got some teeth from a pig that's there. And then we've got part of the skull of an ape that's there. So you take part of the skull of an ape, some teeth from a pig, and the jawbone of a man, and you put it together, and you even draw what he looked like in the clothing he's wearing, and put it in the textbook and teach our kids that man there is 20 million years old, and that's what he looked like. That's how he dressed. This is what he ate. And you got all of that from a gorilla's bones, some pig teeth, and some other things. They've been dishonest. And anybody, you think about that, a scientist that says evolution is unproven and unprovable, but the only alternative is special creation, and that's unthinkable. You think they might be dishonest? They deny God, they deny the Bible, and just many of the fossils that have been discovered like that, they've done the very same thing. They've used some parts from a monkey, they've used some parts from a man, they've used some parts from something else, and in some of them they even have made some plaster of Paris bones and wouldn't let scientists look at them. And there was another fella years ago, and I remember seeing this in a textbook, by the name of Ernst Haeckel. He was a German doctor, and he did a lot in embryology. And he had this theory of embryonic recapitulation, which means that the human embryo has gills like a fish. And the human embryo inside the mother breathes like a fish breathes. That the gills open and close, and the baby's inside the mother breathing through those gills, breathing that liquid. And as it develops over a period of the 9 months, those gills begin to close up, and then when it's born, the gills are not there. He even took some kind of an x-ray several years ago, and he had this published in textbook, and he had the human embryo inside the mother all bent over the way they are and balled up, the cute little ball, and there were some little slits on the side of the neck of that. And that was in the textbooks for many years. But before he died, they exposed him as one who took the x-ray and took a pencil or something and drew those little gill slits on that little tiny baby. He was a liar, and he was a dishonest man. But they kept that in the books for all those years. I don't think it's in any of our textbooks anymore. I haven't seen it. But imagine the dishonesty that's involved with somebody like that. He's got a theory, and he's going to prove it by giving you false information. Well, that tells you he's a liar, and that tells you he's dishonest. And why would you believe anything that he said? Where are those transitional forms? And if evolution happened, it either happened by birth or transformation. And by that I mean, 2 non-humans gave birth to a human. Or transformation, it's whatever it is walking through the forest, and it picks up its left foot, and it's not a man, but when it puts its left foot down, it is a man. It transformed. And some of the stupidity and the absurdity of some of the arguments of something over a period of millions and millions of years, it left the sea and became something that could breathe air. What happens to a fish when you take it out of the water? But if you keep taking fish out enough, if you could do that 1,000,000 years, you'd finally find one that could live, right? No. Now, do we have some fish that you see on TV, some weird-looking fish that can crawl out and crawl around on the bank with their flippers and do? Yeah. Do Do we have some things that are in the sea that breathe air, that, like whales, that they can stay under there for a long time, but then they come up and get a little breath of air? Yeah, we do. But you don't have them evolving and turning into that. And when you think about evolution, you think about it, if you've got something evolving over millions and millions of years, if you've got an ape turning into a man, that it slowly turns into a man, and it finally turned into a man, it's a man now, it's not an ape. Wouldn't there have to be a female in that same vicinity? Because the male can't have offspring from the ape. So it was an ape for all those years. Now it turned into a man. So that wouldn't solve the problem. You've got one man on the face of the earth. Well, where's the female? You got to have a female. But over billions and millions of years, an ape turned into a female, and then you got to get them together, which that's silly to start with, but they don't even deal with the whole situation. In Genesis, everything bears after its kind. Cows produce cows. But when we stop and think about that, and sometimes the evolutionist tries to make a point on things that really they shouldn't make the point on. What all is involved in the cow family? You know, we think about cows, but think about all over the world. We got cows. What about a Cape buffalo? Is that in the cow family? Well, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. Some animals may be in the family that look like them and others don't. But if they're in the same family, you can cross a cow with a Cape buffalo. One that I hadn't heard of till I was a grown fella, and that's beefalo. Evidently, a buffalo is in the cow family because you can cross them. In nature, they never got together, evidently, and produced an offspring, but we have scientists and we have farmers and all that breed animals, and you know the evolutionists have tried everything in the world to prove evolution. You know they've tried to artificially inseminate a monkey or an ape so that they could prove evolution. I know they've tried that, but it didn't work, and it won't work. Well, what all's in the cow family? Well, I don't know. Don't know all the animals around the world. What about a yak? You see those yaks, long-haired things over where it's real, real cold. If they're in the cow family, then you could cross Angus and a yak. I don't know what you come up with, but you've got all kinds of different cows. And in the cow family, you breed certain cows to where you get a dairy cow. And this cow gives a lot of milk. You didn't create a new species here. You just took this cow and this cow and this cow and crossbred them, and you come up with something that gives more milk. I don't know about you, but when it comes to eating the cow, I'd much rather have an Angus than a Holstein or a Jersey. Jersey gives good milk, but I prefer an Angus when it comes to eating. So you got cows that you can do. Now, what about the Cape buffalo, the yak, all the animals it might be? What about in the dog family? What all would be in the dog family? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But everything that's in the dog family could breed and interact and have more different kinds. We have certain varieties of dogs that over the years we've created because we bred this one to this one and come up with that, and we come up with some new things. Are coyotes in the dog family? Are wolves in the dog family? Are jackals in the dog family? Are some of the African hyenas, are they in the dog family? I don't know. They may not be. And if they're not, they won't crossbreed. But if they are, they will. And when we look at that, why hasn't somebody crossbred the horse with the cow? Why don't they do that? Why don't we have an elephant hippopotamus crossbred there? And somebody's probably tried it. Some of these evolutionist folks. But it won't work. It won't work. Think of the varieties of chickens. Carolyn's got a book that I think one of our granddaughters gave us of chickens. And I've never seen some of the weirdest looking chickens with feathers on their feet and the heads that they have. Just all kinds of chickens. Well, where'd those come from? Well, you cross this with this one and you come up with that. And then you cross this one in and you got another one and another. And you can do that. You can have all kinds of new varieties of chickens. But where's the chicken and the eagle that's crossed? Where's the canary and the eagle that's crossed. It doesn't do that. Or the hummingbird crossed with the eagle. That won't work. And again, I'm not a scientist, and I don't know what birds are in a particular family that can cross, and there may be some that can. And of course, we know that with cows and dogs and pigs and other animals, farm animals. We know that you can come up with new varieties, but you don't cross that time and time again that they brought forth after its kind or his kind. Now, define the kind. And in that kind, yeah, you can. And isn't it interesting that with Adam, when God created Adam, and he's naming all the animals, God saw that there was no helpmeet suitable for him. Well, the ape was there. Well, why didn't God say, here, take a few years, but here's your wife, a female ape? No, they're not compatible. Not only in personality and getting along with each other, but they're not compatible from the standpoint of having offspring. They can't do that. So God created woman and brought to Adam and gave the woman to him. That's his wife. And now, in the human family, human beings marrying other human beings, interracial marriages and all, you have the offspring, you have humans. You have humans. But you can't cross the human with any other animal, anything out there. And then there's certain animals that you can't cross them with anything that's outside their family kind. And as I said, I'm not smart enough to know all those kinds, but we've got scientists that's named all of that. So that can't be done. Everything is to bring forth after its kind. When we think about the Bible, and the Bible telling us all of this, in the past 150 years, all the Bible societies around the world, and Bible societies exist for the purpose of translating the Bible in the language of their people. All these African nations have a Bible society so they can get the Bible in their language. They've told us that there has been 2 trillion copies of the Bible printed. That's a lot of Bibles, isn't it? 2 trillion Bibles have been printed and translated in hundreds and hundreds of languages. And it's probably one of the most up-to-date books in the world. And here we have the beginning of time. We have the beginning of all of these things. And God's Word records that for us so we don't have to be in the dark and wonder how we got here. Everything was created by God in a miraculous way. And then God set the laws of nature into effect. He made the first apple tree, and He made the first oak tree miraculously. But then His laws of nature set in effect, and now we have apple trees being produced and oak trees being produced today because of His laws that He set in effect. He created gravity, and then He put it in effect. He put the sun the distance, and the moon the distance from the earth, and all that. And then He set the solar system in motion. He started it, and it's there, and it's going to be there until He comes back the second time. Man is spoken of here in Genesis chapter 1 as being made in the image of God. Not in the physical, not that God has 10 fingers and 10 toes. God is spirit, and man is unique above everything God created. The cows, the horses, the pigs, the chickens. The word sometimes is used in the Bible, spirit, and it's translated breath. His spirit left him. His breath left him. Sometimes the word soul and spirit are used interchangeably. But a dog, a pig, a cow, a horse has breath. And in the Bible it sometimes talks about the spirit, and it means breath in that animal. But that animal doesn't have a soul that's made in the image of God. That animal can't sit down and reason and know that this is wrong to do and this is right. And that animal can't sit down and read the Bible and say, God wants me to be a Christian, and I want to be a Christian. We're the only thing that God created that has that capability. One fellow said, I think it was Herbert Spencer, that there are some principles necessary for life to exist. And he said those are time, space, matter, force, and motion. And it's interesting that somebody came along several years later and said, okay, let's look at Mr. Spencer's idea there. In the beginning, there's time. Space, God created the heavens, the earth, the heavens is space. The earth, He created the earth, there's matter. In the beginning, God, there's the force that did all of it. And then God created, there's the motion. So in the very first verse of the Bible, you have time, space, matter, force, and motion that answers all of those questions. In Genesis chapter 1, you have the days of creation. What God made on day 1, what God made on day 2. You've read all of this, I'm sure, in the past. The firmament, as he read this morning for us. Sometimes people say, well, what is the firmament? And the firmament is the heavens. So he made the heavens. The Bible talks about 3 heavens. You know, there's a heaven where the bird flies. I've been on a few airplane flights at 50,000 feet above sea level. I've never looked out the window and seen a bird flying at 50,000 feet. There's no oxygen there. It's very, very limited up there. So you've got where the birds fly, then you got where the 747s fly, and space, even leaving that, when you leave the gravity pull of the earth, you're in free float outer space. But just to get there, you're just in the very edge of space. And then you've got the heaven where God is, the third heaven. And nobody's been there, and nobody's going to go there until the end of time. He talks about He created light. He created the sun, the moon, the stars. And you see the logical order of all of this. He creates the air, the atmosphere, so things can live and grow. You couldn't have Him creating animals, and then the next day He creates the air from the breathe that all die. So He creates the grass, and He creates the air, and He creates all of this, the sun, the moon, the stars, and then He created the animals. And the very day that He created the animals, they could eat, they could drink. And God saw these things and saw that it was good. All of this is done. What's the crown of His creation? What's the final thing that He created? Mankind. Man, Adam and Eve. There's the crown. And they're to have dominion over everything else. God's highest creation was man, and He's made in the image of God. Let us make man in our image. Verse 26. God created man in His own image. He made them male and female. The Hebrew word man basically is the idea of humanity, mankind. And in mankind, there's 2 categories. There's male man and there's female man. Not trying to confuse us with the difference of the sexes, but the idea of the word just simply means human. And that's why even in the New Testament, the Bible go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth is baptized shall be saved. The word he there is used in a generic way. That's not excluding women. He that believeth is baptized. He, that is, he, mankind. And in mankind, there's 2 categories. There's female and male mankind. And by the way, there's only 2. Don't you wish that people understood in the day and time we live today that there's just 2, and you see these silly people that talk about their pronouns and all the different things.
They will.
Yeah, they will. And I've got a solution because they don't like my solution. But the bathroom situation of where you go, which bathroom can you go in? Well, if you feel like a woman, you can go in this one. Or if you feel like a man, you can go in that one. Or if biologically, if you were born this or whatever. Why don't they just say? Maybe just put it up there that Y chromosomes go here and X chromosomes go here. That can't be changed. You can cut body parts off and you can add body parts and you can change and use estrogen and testosterone and you can grow your hair and do all this other stuff, but you can't change those chromosomes. God put those in a man and they're different from a woman. And you can take a drop of blood from a man, a drop of blood from a woman, and look at them and you can tell which one's a man, which one's a woman. And it'll be that way till you die. So why don't we get back to identify with my chromosomes? That would be a good way to do it. And then we'd all be what we are. That God has made us that way. Well, we're out of time. We'll continue. We'll be ready to start Genesis chapter 2 next time. Appreciate your presence in our Bible class.